Hello, 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 and namaste, my witchlings. Bear with me for just a sec. I have the sniffles. Please bear with me. I stepped outside. It's cold out there. All right. Okay. Et voila. How is everybody? I am here. I'm doing pretty good. I am hype AF to talk about today's topic. So, need to make sure those go back where they belong. How are you guys? Just kind of sitting here chilling out, waiting for everybody to come in. We are late, so that's better. I think I inhaled saliva again. I am just having a stellar day. All right. All right. One last sip and we're getting started here, y'all. Namaste, my witchlings, and welcome, welcome, welcome to Bitchin Witch, where magic meets accountability, shadow meets spotlight, and we don't just light candles, we light conversations. Now, whether you're returning or joining us for the very first time, I am really, really glad you are here. Hi, hey, hello, I am Di, your yoga witch, and this is the space where we pull back the curtain, question the narrative, and refuse to dress fear up as virtue. So go grab your coffee, your tea, your journal, maybe something to fidget with if you need to regulate while we get into it. This is not a comfort-only space. This is a growth space. We can be grounded and fiery at the very same time. Here we talk politics without pretending they're not spiritual. We talk spirituality without pretending it exists outside in the real world. And we practice shadow work at a cultural level, not just a personal one. So if this space resonates, if you appreciate nuanced rage, regulated fire, and a witch who will both validate you and challenge you, like, share, and subscribe, you guys. It helps our witchling community grow, and it keeps the cauldron bubbling here. And if you are ready to step just a little deeper into our circle, witchling membership is open. Your support helps me keep creating all of these conversations, keep building community, and keep showing up with both compassion and spine. If you can afford it and you feel called, tap that join button to come a little bit closer on into the coven. All right, let's get to it. Take a sip. Let's go. All right, witchlings. Tonight we are talking about love. Not the Hallmark aisle, not the filtered Instagram quote, and not the live, laugh, legislative overreach kind. The binding kind. Because this week's Sanskrit word is Premabandhana, the binding of love. Love binds families, it binds communities, it binds nations. But reminder, anything that binds can also constrict. A wedding ring and a handcuff, both circles. The question is not whether love is present. The question is what that love is doing. Tonight we are looking at two things that on the surface seem very, very, very separate and different. The SAVE Act, framed as protecting elections, and a recent student walkout where a grown-ass adult put hands on a teenager who was peacefully protesting. Vastly different arenas, same psychological root, fear dressed up as protection. So, let's get into it, shall we? So, we're starting with when protection becomes sacred language. The SAVE Act. It is currently being framed as safeguarding elections, protecting the integrity and the sanctity of the vote. Notice that word there, sanctity. That's altar language or cathedral language. That is the tone you use when you lower your voice and remove your shoes. When bureaucratic let's see if the third time really is the charm tonight. Okay, here we go. When bureaucratic policy starts borrowing spiritual vocabulary, that is when we need to hit the pause button. Because sacred framing changes the emotional temperature of a conversation. If something is sacred, questioning it feels irreverent. If something is sacred, restricting access can feel righteous. If something is sacred, dissent can be framed as desecration. And that shift matters. Sacred language is powerful because it bypasses analysis and moves straight into identity. It doesn't just say this policy improves security, it says this protects something holy. And once something is holy, we stop asking ordinary questions. But democracy is not a relic sealed in glass. It is a living system. Living systems require maintenance, yes, but they also require oxygen. Now, let's be clear. Election security very much matters. Verification very much matters. No mature democracy runs on vibes alone. Ballots should be counted accurately. Processes should be transparent. Fraud, when it occurs, should be addressed. The existence of safeguards here is not the problem. The emotional posture around them is. Here's how the question shadow work Here is the question shadow work demands. Are we strengthening resilience or tightening control because we feel threatened? Resilience is the ability of a system to absorb stress without collapsing. It is not about eliminating all risk. It is about increasing capacity. Control, on the other hand, my friends, is about narrowing variables, reducing unpredictability, shrinking the field of participation so the outcome feels more manageable. Secure systems tolerate participation. Insecure systems narrow it. Secure love of country says we invest in civic education, we increase access, we improve transparency, we make sure people understand how the system works so trust grows. Anxious love of country says we must restrict, we must narrow, we must guard. Guarding is not inherently wrong, though. Even gardens have fences, my love. But fences can keep predators out, or they can keep neighbors away. Intent and proportion matter. When protection rhetoric escalates beyond data, when the emotional tone feels urgent, existential, apocalyptic even, that's when we examine the nervous system underneath it. Fear exaggerates threat. Fear magnifies rare events into pervasive danger. Fear tells us that if we do not clamp down immediately, everything is going to unravel. And here's the biological reality. Fear narrows perception. It is brilliant in an emergency. It is far less helpful as a governing philosophy. If we treat democracy as a fragile heirloom that must be shielded from touch, we communicate something subtle but profound. That participation itself is destabilizing. But participation is the fucking point. A robust system is one that can handle friction. It can handle disagreement. It can handle demographic shifts and generational differences and evolving norms. A fragile system requires constant guarding, and here is where our Premabandhana comes in. Premabandhana, the binding of love. In its light form, it binds people into shared belonging. It says we are connected, we are responsible to one another, we are building something together. In its shadow form, thank you, Yu-Yo. In its shadow form, it grips. It says, I care so much that I must control. I love this so fiercely that I cannot risk change. I will tighten my hold to keep it from slipping away. Grip ain't the same thing as care. Care strengthens capacity, grip restricts movement. Care says, let's make sure everybody understands how this works, and grip says, let's make sure fewer people can touch it. And this is the tension. Do we believe democracy becomes stronger when more people understand it, engage with it, and trust it? Or do we believe that it becomes stronger when access narrows and participation feels conditional? The language we use reveals the emotional foundation we're standing on. If we describe participation as a threat, we are not operating from secure attachment. If we describe inclusion as dilution, we are not operating from confidence. A secure love of country can tolerate scrutiny. It can tolerate expansion. It can tolerate being questioned because it trusts its own structure. An anxious love of country interprets questioning as an attack. So when we hear words like sanctity, purity, integrity invoked with a tone of alarm, we do not automatically assume malice, but we do examine fear. Because fear in ceremonial robes still behaves like fear. And if we are going to bind ourselves to something, to a nation, a system, or a shared civic identity, we absolutely have to fucking ask, is this binding creating strength? Or is it tightening because we're afraid to loosen our grip? Good question. Now, let's talk about anxiety. Excuse me. Anxiety at the level of a nation. So, let's zoom out psychologically here. Attachment theory doesn't just apply to romantic partners sitting across from each other in therapy offices. It applies to families. It applies to organizations. It applies to religious groups. And yes, it applies to nations. At its core, attachment theory studies how we respond to connection and perceived threat. Secure attachment says connection can stretch. Change does not automatically mean abandonment. Anxious attachment says if I lose control, I disappear. Now, imagine scaling that from 2 people to 330 million. When demographic shifts happen, when political landscapes change, when cultural norms evolve, when younger generations show up differently, speak differently, and organize differently, an anxious system tightens. It redefines belonging, it redraws lines, it builds procedural hoops, and it increases tests, thresholds, and requirements. Not because all boundaries are evil. Boundaries are absolutely necessary. Every healthy system has them. I mean, a cell membrane keeps a cell intact. A constitution sets limits and powers. Structure is not our enemy. But here is the massive distinction. Healthy boundaries are proportional. Fear-driven boundaries are reactive. Because, once again, fear exaggerates threat. Fear makes edge cases feel existential. If a rare instance of fraud occurs, fear tells you the entire structure is compromised. Oh my God, we gotta tear it all down and start from scratch. If a protest disrupts comfort, fear tells you the social order is collapsing. Oh my God, it's World War III in Portland! If a demographic trend shifts power balances, fear whispers that identity itself is under siege. Can we say the war on Christians? Anxious attachment is hypersensitive to loss. It interprets change as danger. And when fear becomes policy, it does not announce itself as fear. It announces itself as protection. Protection of democracy, or children, or family values, or tradition, or national identity. Protection language is persuasive because it implies innocence under threat. It frames the speaker as guardian. It positions dissent as harm or potential harm. But shadow work asks better questions. Protection from what? And Who decides what counts as a threat? Because threat perception is not purely objective. It is filtered through identity. If a nation's identity feels stable, participation looks like vitality. If a nation's identity feels fragile, participation looks like dilution. And here is an uncomfortable truth. Sometimes what's being protected is not democracy itself, but a particular experience of dominance within it. When power shifts generationally, culturally, racially, economically, anxious attachment flares. It says, if I'm no longer centered, I'm being erased. Ah! But decentering, my friends, is not erasure. In a secure system, power can circulate without collapse. In an insecure system, any redistribution. Wow. In an insecure system, any redistribution feels like extinction. So policies emerge that redefine who qualifies, who counts, who belongs easily, and who must prove themselves. Again, nuance matters. Not every qualification is oppressive. Not every safeguard is malicious. But patterns tell stories. If procedural tightening consistently affects the same populations, if security repeatedly narrows participation for certain groups more than others, we are no longer talking about neutral structure. We are talking about attachment anxiety manifesting institutionally. Because devotion and possession are not the same thing. Devotion strengthens what it loves. It invests in its capacity, builds literacy, increases transparency, and it invites participation because it trusts resilience. Possession restricts what it loves. It monitors, polices, and narrows access in order to reduce anxiety. Devotion says we are strong enough to handle difference. Possession says difference threatens what is mine. And here is where the psychology gets very, very subtle. Anxious attachment isn't evil. It is protective. It developed to prevent abandonment. But when it goes unexamined, it overcorrects. It clamps down on things that are not actually leaving. A nation experiencing rapid change, be it technological, demographic, or ideological, can experience that change as loss. Even when the structure remains intact, the feeling of familiarity shifts. And humans, well, we are creatures of familiarity. So we cling. We cling to narratives, rituals, symbols, and who we think we are. Clinging feels like safety, but clinging also restricts growth. A secure attachment to national identity would say, we can evolve and still be ourselves. An anxious attachment says, if we evolve, we cease to exist. That belief that evolution equals extinction is what turns ordinary policy debates into existential battles. And when every debate feels existential, moderation disappears. Everything becomes urgent, everything becomes high stakes, and every damn thing becomes framed as the last fork and stand. But healthy systems are not in perpetual last stands. They adjust, they recalibrate, they adapt. If your identity as a nation depends on excluding participation to feel stable, honey, that ain't devotion, that is possession. And possession, when institutionalized, does not produce strength, it produces brittleness. Because the tighter you grip, the more pressure builds. Devotion expands capacity, possession restricts it. So the question beneath every protection narrative becomes this. Are we increasing our ability to handle complexity, or are we narrowing the field so we feel less anxious? One path leads to resilience. The other leads to control. and control, when rooted in fear, eventually becomes the very fragility it was trying to avoid. All right, you guys. Now, we are going to shift arenas real quick from legislation to lived behavior, and from what gets written into law to what gets acted out in parking lots and sidewalks and school entrances. Because, my darlings, my dears, my beloveds, policy rhetoric does not float in a vacuum. It filters out into culture. The tone we normalize at the podium eventually shows up in the body. And last week, that tone showed up in a way that makes my fucking blood boil. All right. So, there was a nationwide walkout last week that was student organized, high schools, middle schools, that I am aware of. Might have been college. This was not chaos. This was well organized, well planned. It was great. It wasn't vandalism, and it sure as the hell wasn't some showy operation or shadowy operation. They actually, most of them communicated with their schools. It was teenagers. Teenagers. I want to emphasize this is a group of teenagers. You'll understand in a minute. It was teenagers coordinating a peaceful protest. They had signs, they had chants, they had a time and a place. They gathered outside school grounds to protest policies they believed were unjust. Policies affecting their education, their futures, and their communities. Whether you agreed with their position is irrelevant to what happened next. They were exercising their First Amendment rights, peaceful assembly, and protected speech. Now, if you are one who believes that children do not have constitutional rights, you are wrong. The Constitution doesn't say that you only get your rights once you've reached the age of majority. Constitutional rights apply to every single person on American soil. Now, let's ground all of this historically for just a second. Youth civic engagement is not new. It is not radical. It is woven into American story. Student protests during the Civil Rights Movement, college demonstrations against the Vietnam War, walkouts demanding gun reform after school shootings. Teenagers have always been part of the moral conversation in this country. They are often inconvenient, they are often loud, and they are sometimes idealistic to the point of naivete. And they are allowed to be. That is part of the deal. Teenagers holding signs, teenagers chanting, teenagers participating in democracy, which alone is kind of impressive. But now here's what happened. During this event, and this happened in the event I'm referring to happened in the town 2 towns over from me. During this event, an adult, not a student, not a school employee, just a random adult, approached the protest. Video shows, raised voices, words were exchanged, visible frustration, and then in a moment of, I cannot even imagine what kind of stupidity and escalation, the adult physically laid hands on one of the teenagers. Put hands on him. Not to steady them from falling, not some accidental brush in a crowded space, straight up fucking grabbed the kid in an attempt to stop, intimidate, or silence that teenager. And the teenager recoiled. I mean, come on. They were shocked, confused, because what the fuck just happened? Let's pause here, because this is not a policy debate. This is not a disagreement about civic procedure. That is a regulation failure in the adult. You can disagree with a protest. You can think teenagers are misguided. You can think they're naive. You can think that the issue is complex and nuanced and oversimplified on poster board. You can think that teenagers really don't understand what's going on. But you do not get to escalate physically towards a minor and call it conviction. That is not strength. That is emotional dysregulation. And dysregulation, when justified as righteousness, becomes fucking dangerous. Because what message does that send? It sends the message to this child that participation is conditional on adult approval. It sends the message that exercising rights may come with physical intimidation. It sends the message that power answers speech with force. Now, I do want to be precise about the law for just a moment. Yes, the First Amendment protects speech and peaceful assembly from government retaliation. It does not shield anyone from social disagreement. It does not immunize you, does not protect you from being criticized, but physical contact, especially unwanted, non-consensual, aggressive fucking contact, crosses a line. That is assault and battery. You do not ever lay hands on another person, I don't fucking care what age they are, without consent. We expect adults to regulate around children. Come on, that's baseline social contract shit. It is ridiculous that the teenager in this situation was more fucking mature than the adult. Adults are supposed to model emotional containment. Adults are supposed to demonstrate how to disagree without harm. Adults are supposed to be the steady nervous systems in the room. When that doesn't happen, when an adult's frustration overrides their regulation, that is not a passionate defense of values. That's a failure of impulse control. Something most of us learned in kindergarten, right? And here's where this all connects back to what we've been talking about. If the cultural narrative says participation is threatening, if rhetoric frames dissent as destabilizing, and if protest is described as an attack, then bodies follow. Because if speech is framed as danger, then stopping it feels protective. If teenagers chanting, just talking. If teenagers chanting are framed as existential threat, then grabbing one of them can be rationalized as defense. That is how fear migrates from language into muscle. We cannot pretend these things are separate. When we normalize the idea that democracy is fragile and constantly under siege, we normalize urgency. And urgency erodes patience. And patience is what keeps our hands to ourselves. You can be furious and regulated at the same time. That's maturity. Hey, hi, look at me right now. I am beyond furious and I'm not getting violent. I've raised my voice, but I'm not getting violent. You can believe someone is wrong and still respect their right to speak. I gave my quality of life so that others could disagree with me. That's stability. The moment an adult decides that a teenager's speech justifies physical escalation, something foundational cracks. Because democracy requires participation, and participation requires safety. Safety requires that the most powerful people in a space, I don't know, the adults in the room, maintain control of themselves. Now, this isn't about shaming one person. That's why I haven't mentioned the name of the person who assaulted a teenager. It's about recognizing the pattern. When fear is elevated to moral urgency, the entire nervous system narrows, voice gets louder, posture gets sharper, and impulse control gets thinner and almost non-existent. And then suddenly, what would normally be unacceptable becomes framed as understandable. Fuck that. It is not understandable. It's explainable. There's a difference. It's explainable through the lens of fear and dysregulation. It is not excusable. If you believe in your values, they should not require you to overpower a child to defend them. If your convictions are solid, they should withstand poster board and chanting. The measure of strength is not how forcefully you can silence someone. The measure of your strength is how steady you remain when challenged. So yes, we are shifting from ballots to bodies because how we talk about participation eventually shapes how we treat participants. And if we want a democracy that can survive dissent, then we need adults who can survive discomfort without putting hands on kids. That's not political. That is baseline humanity. And if we cannot hold that line, there is no legislation in the world that will save the integrity we claim to be protecting. Taking a sip. Still more coffee. Not calm enough yet. All right, my friends. Here's why I am so fucking furious about this. It is not because of party lines, and it's not because I need everybody out there to agree with those students. Not because I believe teenagers are always correct. God, no, I was a teenager and I raised 3 of them. Please, I live in reality, unlike some of us. I am furious. I am livid. I am steaming. I am... Because adults are supposed to regulate around kids. That is baseline. That is not progressive. That is not conservative. That is not fucking radical. That is basic developmental reality. The adult nervous system is supposed to be the bigger container. Civic disagreement is allowed. Physical escalation towards a kid is not. Full fucking stop. When adults model intimidation as a response to speech, we teach something very dangerous. We teach that civic engagement comes with physical risk. We teach that exercising your rights might get you grabbed. We teach that power answers voice with force. And that lesson lands hard, especially on young people who are still forming their understanding of how our society works. Now, yes, we're going to again clarify the legal aspect of this. Yes, the First Amendment protects speech and peaceful assembly from governmental retaliation. It restricts the state from punishing you for speaking or gathering lawfully. It does not, however, prevent private citizens from being dumbass assholes. The Constitution cannot regulate your temper, but democracy survives culturally, not just legally. And this is the piece people miss. A right written on paper is not enough. Rights require cultural reinforcement. They require social norms, and they sure as fuck require adults who uphold the spirit of participation, even when, and especially when, they dislike the content of what's being said. Democracy is not self-sustaining, it is a practice. It survives because communities enforce boundaries. Because when someone crosses a line, other adults step in, or at least we expect them to. Because we collectively agree that certain behaviors are unacceptable, even when, or even especially when, we are angry. If you normalize physical intimidation as a reaction to speech, you erode trust. If young people internalize that protesting might result in being physically handled by an adult, some of them will stop showing up. And when participation decreases because safety feels uncertain, democracy weakens. This is not abstract. This is psychological. Safety is the foundation of participation. Without safety, nervous systems go into threat mode. When a nervous system is in threat mode, it narrows, it withdraws, and it avoids. Ask anybody with PTSD. We can tell you. So, if civic engagement becomes associated with bodily risk, participation shrinks. And that is the opposite of resilience. We talk about protecting democracy all the fucking time, but protecting democracy doesn't just mean securing ballots. It means securing bodies. It means creating spaces where speech can happen without fear of escalation. If your values require intimidation to defend them, they ain't stable. Stable beliefs can tolerate dissent. Stable adults can tolerate teenagers being loud. Because guess what? Teenagers are loud by design. They are biologically wired for intensity. Their prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for impulse control and long-term planning, is still developing. They are still practicing autonomy. They are testing out ideas. They are experimenting with their identity. Adults are supposed to bring regulation to that mix. When adults mirror teenage intensity instead of containing it, something has flipped. Authority without regulation becomes volatility, and volatility erodes legitimacy. Think about it this way, y'all. If you are truly, truly confident in your position, why would you need to silence somebody physically? If you are secure in your values, why would a chant destabilize you? If you believe democracy is strong, why would a protest feel like an existential threat? To answer, more often than we like to admit, the answer is fear. Fear that things are changing too fast, or that influence is shifting, or that familiar narratives are dissolving. Okay, fear is not evil, it is protective. But unexamined fear, when expressed through aggression, becomes harm. And harm, especially towards a child, reverberates. It reverberates through that teenager's nervous system. It reverberates through their peers who witnessed it. It reverberates through the wider community who saw the footage. Because what people see is this. An adult could not handle disagreement without putting their fucking hands on a kid. That doesn't communicate strength. It communicates fragility. It communicates weakness. Because that adult was so weak-minded that they had to resort to physical violence. There's a deeper layer here too, y'all. Children and teenagers learn how to be citizens by watching adults be citizens. They don't just listen to civics class lectures, they watch how we behave when challenged. If they see adults respond to disagreement with intimidation, they're going to internalize that as an option. If they see adults step in, de-escalate, and uphold boundaries without violence, they're going to internalize that too. This is modeling. Modeling matters. We cannot preach nonviolence in theory and practice aggression in fucking public. We cannot say use your voice and then punish youth for doing exactly that. You do not have to agree with a protest to defend their right to protest. You do not have to like a chant to protect the body chanting it. This is the discipline of a pluralistic society. Pluralism means we coexist with people whose views we find uncomfortable, by the way. That coexistence only works if we agree on certain behavioral baselines. No hitting, no grabbing, no intimidation. We keep our motherfucking hands to ourselves. That is kindergarten level understanding and instruction, people. But yet, here we are. When we fail to hold that line, we chip away at something foundational. Because democracy is not just about who votes. It's about who feels safe participating. It is about whether dissent is met with dialogue or force. It is about whether the loudest voice in the room is also the most regulated. If we want a society where young people grow into engaged, thoughtful citizens, then we have to show them that engagement does not equal endangerment. We have to show them that disagreement does not equal dehumanization. And we really, really have to show them that adults can stay steady even when furious. That is why this moment matters. Not because of ideology, because of example. And examples are what shape the next generation's understanding of power. If we want power to mean stability instead of domination, then we have to live that. Hands to ourselves, voices aloud, and regulation first. Always. Time for some coffee. Hey guys, if you're enjoying this particular podcast right at the moment and you would like to see more of it, please do us all a favor and go ahead and click on the join button down below and go ahead and step closer into our coven and join this channel. We have lots of perks for my witchlings and we have tiers starting at just $1 a month. Thank you very much. I love you guys. You are the best part of my week. Thank you for your support. Now let's get back to our show, shall we? We shall. There we go. Oh God. What did you do? I don't know how that ended up there. I did. That's okay. Anyway, sorry about that. All right. Yep. All right. Here we go. I forgot. All right. Here we go. Another sip. All right, you guys. Oh, now we are dressing fear up in ceremonial robes. All right. Now we get to connect our dots. What does the SAVE Act have to do with a grown adult assaulting a teenager? On the surface, they live in different rooms. One is legislative, one is behavioral, one is about ballots, the other is about bodies. But underneath, the emotional root is the same. It is fear. Fear that participation will dilute something sacred. Fear that inclusion will destabilize something familiar. Fear that change equals loss. Fear is not inherently immoral. It is protective. It evolved to keep us alive. You know, when a tiger appears, fear narrows your focus and prepares your muscles. But when fear mistakes discomfort for danger, it massively overreacts. And when fear is unexamined, it seeks control. Control reduces variables and it lowers unpredictability and it can make anxiety feel manageable. In policy, that looks like restriction framed as protection. In culture, that looks like adults escalating towards youth and calling it righteousness. In rhetoric, well, that looks describing dissent as attack. In behavior, well, it looks an awful lot like treating a protester as a threat instead of a participant. I swear I can breathe. It's the same nervous system pattern expressed at different scales. If I am afraid that something I love is slipping away, my instinct may be to tighten my grip. If I am afraid that my influence is shrinking, my instinct may be to narrow the field. If I am afraid that the world is changing way too fast, my instinct may be to freeze it in place. Make America great again? Premabandhana, the bending of love, in its shadow form says, I care so much that I must control. That line feels virtuous. It feels noble. It feels like devotion. But, my friends, grip and devotion are not the same. Healthy love says, I care enough to strengthen resilience. It doesn't panic at friction, and it sure as fuck doesn't interpret every disagreement as betrayal. Healthy patriotism says, you have the right to speak even if I disagree. It trusts that the system can absorb dissent without disintegrating. Healthy adults say, I can be furious and still regulated. They understand that anger is information, not instruction. Anger tells you something matters. It does not automatically justify your behavior. Fear in ceremonial robes is dangerous because it looks righteous. It sounds like protection. It feels like loyalty. It dresses itself in moral language. But underneath, it is often attachment anxiety. Attachment anxiety screams, if I loosen my grip, I'm going to lose everything. Secure attachment says, if I loosen my grip, that bond is still going to hold. That distinction matters. A secure democracy can withstand protest. A secure identity can withstand evolution. A secure adult can withstand being challenged by someone younger. When security is internal, you don't need to silence others to feel stable. When security is externalized, dependent on control, every single challenge feels destabilizing. And the uncomfortable layer. Sometimes what we're protecting is not democracy itself. Sometimes it's familiarity. Sometimes it's dominance. Sometimes it is comfort. And comfort is not the same thing as safety. Safety is about harm prevention. Comfort is about predictability. Change disrupts comfort. It does not automatically threaten safety. But when comfort is mistaken for survival, the nervous system reacts as if extinction is imminent. That's when fear escalates, language sharpens, and when bodies move before thought catches up. And that is why shadow work is not optional. Shadow work means asking, am I protecting something real, or am I protecting my comfort? Because those are not the same. Protecting something real might look like improving infrastructure, clarifying procedures, and increasing education. Protecting comfort typically looks like narrowing participation, dismissing dissent, and escalating defensively. The first increases capacity, the second reduces anxiety. Now, reducing anxiety is not inherently bad because we all want relief. But y'all knew there was a but coming. But if the way we reduce anxiety is by limiting someone else's voice, that relief comes at a cost. It comes at the cost of resilience, trust, and the cost of modeling stability. Fear in ceremonial robes screams, this is sacred, do not question. Healthy devotion says, this is sacred. Let's make it strong enough to withstand question. Fear says, silence them. Devotion says, let them speak. I can handle it. Fear says, restrict access. Devotion says, increase literacy. Fear says, if I lose control, I disappear. Security says, I'm still here, even if the room changes. So when we look at legislation framed as protection and culture responding to protest with escalation, we are not looking at two separate incidents, two random incidents. We are looking at a shared emotional thread. Fear trying to feel safe. The question isn't whether fear exists, because Goddess knows it always will. The question is whether we let fear drive the car, or whether we acknowledge it, regulate it, and choose resilience instead. Because, my lovelies, Premabandhana can bind us into solidarity, or it can knot us into control. And which one we choose determines whether our love strengthens the system or tightens until it cracks. Thank you. There we go. Suck, swallow, then breathe, die. All right, y'all. I am angry. I am furious. Anger is information. I'll catch up with that once we're done. All right. I am angry. I am furious. I am livid. I am raging. Anger is information. It tells you something matters. It tells you a boundary has been crossed. It tells you a value was violated. But anger without regulation becomes harm. So here is the steady fire, the heart fire. Not wildfire or scorched earth, a hearth flame. Contain, intentional, useful. First, know your rights. Then teach your kids their rights. Practice them responsibly. Don't just shout about freedom. Understand it. Study it. Know where it begins and where it ends. Democracy is a practice, not a performance. Just so you know, you can find copies of the Declaration of Independence, the Bill of Rights, and the Constitution of the United States online. Please go look them up and read them. If you witness harm, especially towards a minor, do not freeze. Get trained in safe intervention, know your local laws, and be the regulated adult in the room. There are organizations that teach these skills. Democracy is not self-sustaining, my loves. It requires participation, protesting, voting, boycotting. Participation, though, requires courage. Courage requires regulation. So we're going to go out and spread love, spread joy, and spread kindness. Not the performative kind, the steady kind. We're going to tell the people we love that we love them in all their forms. 2 legs, 4 legs, fur, feathers, scales, paws, claws, etc. Do not assume they know. Say it loud. Say it often. Those last goodbyes are not guaranteed. Steady. Steady means this. We protect kids. We protect rights. And we examine our fear. We examine our fear before we codify it. And my loves, my dears, my witchlings, if you take one thing away from anything and everything I ever say in this space, please let it be this. You are loved. You are wanted. You are needed. And you have a reason and a purpose for being here, even if you don't know what it is yet. Your voice matters. Your presence matters. And this world is so much better because you are in it. And witches, we do shadow work. We don't crown our fear and call it holy. And now, I'm going to check in with my chat. No? Okay. Namaste, my witchlings. I see Raya. Oh, and Joram. Uh-oh. Oh, Raya, the first thing I see is Raya saying, this current timeline makes me nauseous. Yup. Yeah. YouTube is being really weird today. Alright. Oh, that's wonderful. Thank you! I'm just now seeing the pretty necklace comment. I wish I knew when and where I acquired it. Have a good week, you guys. I love you. I hope you had the most wonderful evening possible. Have a great day or night. See you tomorrow.